Hello. My name's Odessa, and last Christmas, my parents gave my sister a luxury car. And handed me a piece of stale bread in a gift box. No joke. Not forgotten either. That moment didn't just sting, it confirmed something I'd spent my whole life trying not to believe. That in this family, love was conditional. And I had run out of conditions. But what kind of parent does that? What kind of sister smiles through it? And what if that bread wasn't just a gift, but a warning? Would you stay silent? Or would you set the whole table on fire? Let me tell you what I did. It was Christmas Eve, the kind that used to mean something when I was a little girl, before the tension settled into our family like dust no one bothered to clean. I parked my old Toyota at the far end of the driveway, the same one I'd been driving since college. The cold air burned my cheeks as I stepped out. From where I stood, I could see the house glowing under the soft snow, its front yard covered in blinking lights, inflatable reindeer, and a glittering "Merry Christmas" sign that felt more like an act than a sentiment. Through the window, I could already hear the laughter. My sister Bryn's voice carried like a bell, sharp, confident, and impossible to ignore. I adjusted my coat, took a deep breath, and walked toward the front door, carrying a small box of homemade cookies. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and polished wood. The family had gathered around the kitchen island, drinks in hand. My mother, Vera, looked impeccable as always, her pearls glinting under the chandelier. "Odessa," she said, her smile tight. "You're late." "Traffic," I replied simply. It was easier than reminding her she never actually told me the right time to come. My father, Alton, sat near the fireplace reading the evening paper, pretending not to notice the frost between us. He hated conflict, so he perfected the art of disappearing even when present. Bryn was radiant, perfectly curled hair, gold earrings that matched the glitter on her nails. She turned to me with that same overly bright grin she used whenever cameras were near. "You made it. I wasn't sure you'd come after last year." "I'm here," I said, setting my cookies on the counter. Dinner was a blur of polite conversation and careful silences. I helped set the table, arranging the silverware while my mother followed behind, fixing whatever I'd done. "Forks on the left, Odessa. We've gone over this," she said, as if I were still 16. Meanwhile, Bryn floated around the room, refilling wine glasses, touching shoulders, laughing loudly at her own stories. She was the golden child, the one everyone praised for, turning out so well. When we sat down to eat, I noticed my name wasn't on any of the place cards. Everyone else had a neatly printed tag, tied with red ribbon. I found an empty chair near the end of the table and quietly took it. No one said a word. The meal passed slowly. The conversation moved easily between Vera and Bryn, like a tennis match I wasn't invited to play in. Every now and then, my father cleared his throat to change the subject when the air got too thick. After dessert, Vera clapped her hands. "Now, for the big moment. We have something special this year," she said, glancing at Bryn with pride. Everyone turned as my father handed over a small box wrapped in gold. Bryn opened it, squealed, and held up a set of car keys. "It's an Audi," Vera announced. "Her hard work deserves to be celebrated properly." Applause followed. Someone joked about how Bryn's success is the family's success. Cameras flashed. I smiled faintly, trying not to look as small as I felt. Then my mother turned toward me, handing over a box about the size of a sandwich. "And for you, dear." The room quieted. I peeled the silver paper carefully, trying not to make a mess. Inside was a small jewelry box, the kind that might hold earrings. But when I opened it, I froze. Inside sat a half-bitten piece of sourdough bread, dry and stiff, wrapped in tissue paper. I blinked, thinking maybe it was some kind of inside joke. But no one laughed. My mother looked expectantly at me, like she was waiting for me to perform. "Well? It's unique," I said softly, forcing a smile. My throat tightened. Bryn leaned toward her husband and whispered something that made him snicker. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. No one asked me how I felt. They just moved on. Champagne popped. Music started again. I placed the bread back in the box and set it beside my chair. My hands were trembling, so I folded them in my lap. In that moment, I realized something had shifted. Not in them, they'd always been this way. The shift was in me. When dinner ended, I excused myself and went upstairs to the guest room. The laughter downstairs grew louder, bouncing off the walls. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the small gift box on the nightstand. The bread looked absurd under the lamplight. I picked it up, turned it over. The bite mark stared back at me, jagged and cruel. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera. For reasons I couldn't explain, I snapped a photo and posted it, no caption. Just the bread, sitting alone in the box. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with a few "Are you okay?" messages from old friends. I ignored them. My mind drifted backward, to Christmases long ago. Bryn always got something beautiful. jewelry, trips. My gifts were practical, socks, cash, once a used cookbook. Mom said it was because I was sensible. I remembered one year when our grandmother was still alive. She'd given me a tiny snow globe with 2 figures inside, sitting under a tree. So you never forget to make space for peace, she told me. It was the only gift I'd ever kept. After she passed, no one gave me anything that felt real. The phone buzzed again. I didn't check it. I couldn't. Downstairs, I heard Bryn's laughter rise above the music. She always laughed too loud after wine. Then her voice, clearer than the rest, I knew she'd be too polite to make a scene. She never changes. Something in me froze, not sadness this time, but clarity. I stood up, walked to the window, and watched the snow falling onto the driveway. Her new Audi sat there, gleaming under the Christmas lights. My Toyota looked small beside it, covered in frost. I whispered, almost to myself, maybe I have changed. You just don't see it yet. The house hummed with laughter, but upstairs, everything was quiet. I reached for my phone again, scrolled through old photos of Grandma and me baking bread together. She'd always said, what you give from love, no one can take away. I looked at the bread one last time before closing the box. Guess we'll see about that, I murmured. The clock on the nightstand read 11:48 p.m. I turned off the lamp and lay back, the laughter still echoing faintly through the ceiling. I wasn't angry anymore. Not yet. Just awake in a way I hadn't been in years. Downstairs, Bryn's voice rang out one last time, Mom, she's too sensitive. It's just bread. No one corrected her. No one ever did. Her voice still echoed in my head, but something inside me had already begun to shift. Morning came quietly, the kind of gray light that slips through curtains before anyone is ready to face it. I didn't sleep much. The laughter from downstairs had faded hours ago, but its echo still sat heavy in my chest. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, listening to the faint ticking of the clock, until I decided lying there wouldn't make me feel any less small. When I walked into the kitchen, the house was still. Plates and wine glasses from the night before were scattered across the counters, a half-empty champagne bottle leaned against the sink. The air smelled like sugar, perfume, and something stale, like joy left out too long. Bryn's lipstick marked one of the glasses near the edge of the counter, a dark red imprint shaped perfectly, of course. I picked it up, rinsed it, and set it in the dishwasher without a word. No one had asked me to clean, but somehow that was my unspoken role. The one who fixed what others left behind. The coffee maker gurgled to life just as I wiped the counter. I turned, expecting silence, but my mother was already there, Vera, in her silk robe, hair wrapped neatly, eyes sharp despite the early hour. Morning, I said softly. She didn't answer at first, only measured out coffee grounds with mechanical precision. The smell filled the room, comforting in a way that made me ache. Need help with breakfast? I asked after a moment. Vera's hand paused midair. Without looking up, she said, just make sure the trash gets out before everyone arrives for brunch. Her tone was smooth, distant, like she was talking to a housekeeper, not her daughter. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. Sure. She poured her coffee, added exactly 1 sugar cube, and walked out without another glance. I watched her go, then turned to the trash bin. It was nearly full, wrapping paper, disposable napkins, bits of food. I tied it up and carried it outside to the bins near the patio. The morning air bit into my hands. It was quiet there. The sky hung low, the kind of gray that made the snow look tired. I took a deep breath before heading back inside, trying to steady myself for another day of playing the invisible daughter. By 10, the house was alive again. Guests began trickling in, relatives, old friends of my parents. Bryn's laughter carried from the living room as she showed off her new Audi keys, making sure everyone heard the words, my parents surprised me. I kept to the kitchen, plating pastries and setting up coffee cups. Odessa, my mother called from the patio doors. Come help me with the table settings. The brunch table was beautiful, draped in a red cloth, crystal glasses catching the faint light. 12 chairs surrounded it, each with a place card written in Vera's perfect cursive. I counted them automatically. 11 names. No Odessa. I hesitated, scanning the cards again. Maybe I'd missed it. Looking for something? Bryn's voice came from behind me, syrupy sweet. My seat, I said quietly. I don't see it. She leaned over, mock thinking. Oh. I guess Mom forgot. But hey, there's a folding chair by the bins. We can grab it for you. The word stung, though her tone was light, playful enough to sound harmless. Don't worry, she added, already turning back toward the table. You don't mind sitting near the edge, right? You like quiet spots. I nodded once. Right. I went to get the folding chair myself. It squeaked when I opened it beside the trash bins, half in the shade. From there, I could see the table clearly but felt miles away. The smell of discarded food drifted faintly every time the wind shifted. As people filled the seats, laughter and conversation swelled. I smiled when someone glanced my way, then looked down at my plate. It was easier that way, to be invisible on purpose than ignored by accident. When someone asked me to pass the butter, I did it with a smile so calm it almost felt like power. I listened to the way they talked about Bryn's new car, her promotion, her fiancé's connections. No one mentioned my name once. But I was taking notes in my head: who made eye contact, who didn't, who thanked me when I refilled their drinks. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was watching. After brunch, when everyone scattered to the living room for photos, I stayed behind to clear the plates. The folding chair sat empty now, lonely beside the bins. I stared at it for a long moment, then pulled out my phone. I took a picture, angled just right so the chair looked like any other seat, except for the faint glimpse of the trash cans behind it. I uploaded it to my private account and typed a caption: some seats are earned. Others are denied. And some just smell off. I didn't expect anyone to notice. But within minutes, my phone vibrated, 3 messages from old friends. Rough day? That post hit deep. You okay, Des? I didn't answer. The post wasn't for them. It was for me. A small rebellion, quiet but deliberate. The afternoon passed slowly. Vera bragged about Bryn's job at the firm, Alton nodded along, and I drifted between rooms like a ghost in my own childhood home. Every corner held a memory, but none of them felt warm anymore. By sunset, the guests had gone. I stood by the window, watching the taillights disappear down the street. The silence that followed was almost merciful. Bryn passed behind me, phone in hand. You could smile a little more, you know, she said without looking up. People think you're miserable all the time. People think what they're told to think, I replied. She stopped, raised an eyebrow, smirked. Wow. Look who's growing a spine. Then she laughed, walked away. Her footsteps faded down the hall. I exhaled slowly, the sound barely a whisper. Later that evening, I went upstairs. My bag sat on the bed where I'd left it. I was tempted to pack up and leave, to drive until the house disappeared behind me, but my grandmother's voice came back, soft, steady: watch long enough, and the masks fall off by themselves. So I stayed. Not to belong, but to witness. I went to the bathroom to wash my face. When I came back, something caught my eye, a small slip of paper stuck in the corner of the mirror. At first, I thought it was trash. But when I pulled it free, I saw handwriting, familiar cursive, deliberate. It read, your name was on the original list. She scratched it out herself. The words blurred for a moment before settling sharp and cold in my mind. I turned the note over, but there was nothing else written. No signature, no clue who left it. But I didn't need one. I recognized that careful, looping handwriting. It wasn't Bryn's. It was Mom's. I tucked that crumpled note into my jacket pocket and forced myself out of bed, even though every part of me wanted to stay buried under the sheets. The cold air bit at my skin, but it wasn't nearly as sharp as the ache in my chest. That single line from the note haunted me: your name was on the original list. She scratched it out herself. It repeated in my mind like a cruel lullaby. I still hadn't forgiven the pain, but I was done pretending not to see the truth. I was drowning in a clarity that left no room for retreat or denial. By morning, I moved quietly through the kitchen, the way you might navigate a room of broken glass. The coffee maker sputtered, spitting out steam in tired bursts. Vera was already there, standing by the counter in her robe, placing mugs down with mechanical precision. She didn't glance up, didn't acknowledge me. She moved with the fluidity of someone performing a routine they've done 1,000 times, but for strangers, not family. That silence, so thick, so intentional, felt worse than any shouting match. It was strategic. It told me exactly where I stood. I leaned against the doorway, my voice low and cautious. Good morning. She gave a small nod but kept her gaze on the cup she was filling. That was it. No warmth, no welcome. Just a flicker of acknowledgement so sterile it stung. I swallowed hard, the words I wanted to say pressing against the back of my throat. I wanted to ask her why. Why she erased me. Why she made me a shadow in my own family. But what was the point? Why ask the executioner if they enjoyed sharpening the blade? I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the edge of the kitchen island, watching her as she moved about. I felt the note still tucked in my pocket, creased, but very much alive. My fingers clenched around it beneath the counter, as if holding it would stop my heart from unraveling. Later that morning, I offered to help with filing in the home office. I needed something to ground me, to distract me from spiraling. Alton was already there, seated behind the large oak desk, surrounded by stacks of books and manila folders. He looked up when I entered, his soft smile laced with something heavier. Maybe he sensed it, my storm, just barely restrained. I busied myself with a drawer labeled Christmas Gifts 2024, Drafts. It was supposed to be innocent, just another task to tick off. But when I opened the folder, my stomach tightened. There it was. One of the early planning sheets. Odessa, lease deposit for car. Clear as day. And then, below it, in another document, my name, slashed through in red ink. Next to it, reassigned to Bryn, Audi down payment. My breath caught. My name wasn't just removed. It had been replaced. The betrayal sliced deeper than I expected. Not only had I been forgotten, I had been replaced with intention. Months ago. Before Christmas. Before the wrapping. Before Vera looked me in the eyes and handed me that box of stale bread with a bow. I pressed my fingertip to the line, letting it anchor me. Letting the burn register. When I looked up, Alton was watching me. His eyes were clouded, not confused, not surprised. Just sad. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. I closed the folder, turned on my heel, and walked out without a word. My heart thundered. My hands trembled as I gripped the stairwell railing. Rage, sorrow, disbelief, they were all crashing into each other inside me. And in that chaos, memory rose. The summer before. My car had died on the side of the road. Vera was the one I called. She picked up on the third ring, and when I explained through tears, she had said, "Don't worry, sweetie. We've got something special planned for you this Christmas. Just hang in there." That had kept me going. That voice. That promise. And in the end, all I got was a loaf of bread in a wrapped box. They made a spectacle of it. Called it quirky. Laughed. I played along because what else could I do? I didn't realize my feet had carried me to the garage until I was there, the musty smell of dust and cardboard surrounding me. I began digging, through old trash bins, discarded ribbons, bits of torn wrapping paper. Then, tucked deep beneath a pile of boxes, I found it. A red gift bag, oily and crushed. Inside it, a small white card, its edges stained and curling. My name was printed on the front, Odessa. With shaking fingers, I opened it. To Odessa, may this be the key to your independence. Love, Dad. That was all. No key. No check. No voucher. Just the card. The space where something meaningful should have been was empty. Like me, in this house. I stepped outside, needing air, needing out. The cold wind hit me hard, but I welcomed it. Let it freeze the grief still boiling in my chest. I got into my car, slammed the door shut, and pulled up last year's Christmas video on my phone. My fingers scrubbed through the footage until I reached it, Bryn opening the car brochure. Vera beside her, smiling. Whispering. I turned the volume up. Just make sure Odessa doesn't find out until it's too late. Her tone was crisp. Clean. Calculated. It wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. She didn't forget me, she erased me. I hit pause. Then played it again. Until it's too late. The words echoed, looping in my mind like a curse. I sat in the car for what felt like hours, numb, hollowed out. Then I turned off the phone and exhaled. Slowly. A different kind of breath. This wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't confusion. It was resolve. That night, as darkness wrapped around the house, I lay in bed with my eyes wide open. Images flickered in my head, cards without keys, erased names, whispers behind backs. The wound still bled. But something else was stirring now. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The video played again, grainy, but the voices were unmistakable. I adjusted the volume and rewound the same 4-second stretch for the 5th time, desperate to hear the words beneath the noise. Vera's voice, low and precise, cut through like a scalpel. She can't know, at least, not until it's too late. Then Bryn's voice, shoo, not here. I paused it there, heart pounding. That whisper, that one line, replayed in my mind like a siren. This wasn't a slip of the tongue, not some accidental admission. It was coordinated. Deliberate. A scheme wrapped in civility and gloss, masked by matching sweaters and posed smiles. A plan to cut me out, to erase me without leaving fingerprints. By morning, I had started a new folder on my laptop, December documentation. A title that sounded clinical, detached, far from what I felt. Inside it, I saved the audio clip and named it bluntly, Vera, Deception.mp3. Naming it felt like reclaiming something. If they were going to bury me, I'd at least leave behind breadcrumbs for someone to find. Evidence. Proof that I hadn't imagined the cruelty. Downstairs, the house was coming to life. The clink of ceramic plates. The hiss of coffee brewing. The scent of butter and cinnamon from Vera's morning pastries. I stepped into the kitchen like a ghost with unfinished business. Vera was already at the counter, her back straight, slicing strawberries with almost meditative precision. I took my seat across from her at the breakfast table, toast in hand, steam rising from my cup. She didn't look up. I watched her carefully, noticing things I'd ignored for years, the mechanical calm, the icy poise. Like a conductor leading a quiet orchestra of lies. "Do you mind if I ask something?" I said, my voice even. She glanced up, knife still in hand. Of course. Why was I excluded from the holiday travel plans? Why was I never part of the family gift pool? Her fingers froze mid-slice. She set the knife down and reached for the milk, buying time. "You never asked." The casualness of the lie stung more than if she'd shouted. I forced a breath. "You also never asked how I was doing." The silence that followed was louder than a scream. Vera's eyes lowered to her coffee. She took a slow sip, ignoring me the way one might ignore a fly on the wall, not worth swatting, just worth enduring. Later that afternoon, Alton's laptop was left unattended on the dining table. Normally, he was meticulous, password protecting everything. But today, he slipped. And I didn't. I opened it, fingers trembling. A folder titled Budget Reports sat at the top. Inside, a spreadsheet glared back at me, Family Budget Expenditures 2021 to 2024. I clicked. 3 tabs. Household. Bryn. Odessa, closed. I opened Bryn's tab first. Itemized lines stretched for pages. Over $120,000 in expenses. Designer handbags, tuition for specialized coaching, travel to 6 countries in 2 years, car leases, and even cosmetic procedures. Mortgage assistance. An entry labeled Emotional Restoration Retreat, $4,300. Then I clicked Odessa's tab. 1 entry. 2022, $500, emotional support. That was it. No gifts. No retreats. No help. Just a token, a hollow gesture slapped on like a band-aid over a bullet wound. I heard a step behind me. I slammed the laptop shut. Alton stood in the hallway, watching. Guilt lined his face, but he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. I walked past him, into the kitchen again. Vera was arranging cookies on a tray like nothing had happened. Each sugar-dusted disc was placed with surgical accuracy. "Is there a reason," I said, "that I was never included in holiday planning? I mean, why did I always hear about things after they were already decided?" She didn't flinch. She looked up calmly, as if the question was mildly inconvenient. "You never cared enough to sit beside us," she said. It was a surgical strike. No rage, no heat, just dismissal. "I cared too much," I said, "to let myself be an afterthought." The look she gave me then, brief, appraising, was the first time I thought I saw a crack. Not guilt, not regret. Just the faintest trace of recognition that I wasn't playing dumb anymore. Dinner was a theater. Bryn smiled across the table like the crown princess of some suburban empire. Vera complimented her gracious humility for the 4th time that week, and the family responded with tired applause. I remained standing. Forks clinked. The air was too still. "This house," I said, voice low, "has too many cameras and not enough mirrors." Every face turned. "I'm done being edited out of my own life." Gasps. Blinks. Silence. And then I walked. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just walked, out of the dining room, down the hallway, out the front door. I didn't even take a coat. Outside, the air was sharp and cold, but it was honest. Back at my own apartment, I sat in the dark, the weight of the confrontation finally settling. The apartment was quiet, but inside me, everything was loud. My phone buzzed. I reached for it, almost afraid. "Jace." The message read. "Meet me. I have more than you think." I stared at the words, feeling a shift, a crack of light through the wall. Maybe I wasn't alone in this. Maybe someone else had seen behind the curtain. Some truths survive in silence. Others rot in it. But the ones that matter most? They claw their way out, eventually. And I was finally ready to hear them. The next morning, I sat in my car outside a small diner near the edge of town, engine off, fingers curled tightly around the steering wheel. The glass windows of the diner framed a warm little world where people laughed, sipped from paper cups, and greeted each other with the ease of those untouched by betrayal. The smell of rain still lingered from the night before, and the sky hung low with clouds, like it, too, was waiting. My phone buzzed. "Jace." Inside. Back booth. 8 years. That's how long it had been since I last saw him. 8 years since he vanished without a word, and left me choking on questions with no answers. I'd imagined this moment more times than I could count, but now that it was here, my fingers hesitated at the door handle. When I finally stepped inside, the familiar chime of the bell above the door tugged something deep in my chest. The scent of black coffee, greasy eggs, and maple syrup wrapped around me like a time capsule. A middle-aged waitress caught my eye and gestured with a knowing nod toward the back. He was there. Same posture, same eyes, but his hair was shorter now, streaked with gray at the temples, and his face held the weight of time. His fingers were wrapped around a chipped white mug, steam rising between us as I approached. He looked up. Our eyes met. He smiled. But it wasn't the easy, teasing grin I remembered. It was hesitant. Careful. Hey, Des, he said, voice softer than I expected. Hey, I answered, sliding into the booth across from him. A long pause stretched between us. That kind of silence only exists between people who once knew every inch of each other's lives, but now stood like strangers on opposite shores. I didn't think you'd come, he said, finally. Your message sounded like the beginning of a bad thriller, I replied. You said you had more than I think. That's not something you text lightly. He gave a hollow laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. Fair enough. Then, his tone shifted, heavier, darker. I didn't leave because of us, Odessa. I left because of them. I blinked. What are you talking about? He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone, thumb scrolling through a list of audio files until he found the one he wanted. He pressed play. My mother's voice filled the tiny booth. Cold. Precise. She's broken, Jace. And she'll break you too. The words hit like a gut punch. I froze, breath caught mid-inhale. The air between us crackled with the weight of that recording. She called me, he said, voice low. A week before I ended things. Said she'd help me move on if I stayed away. I was 25. Stupid. Scared. And she was your mom. I thought maybe she saw something I didn't. The waitress came and refilled our coffees, unaware that a decades-long lie was unraveling between refills. You could have told me, I said, my voice steady, but not from strength. It was just numb. I should have, he admitted. But I didn't realize how deep it went until years later. When I found this, he reached into his jacket and slid a small yellowed envelope across the table. Inside were old letters. Handwritten. Addressed to me. These were yours. I found them in your father's attic, helping him move his things last year. They were never opened. I picked up the top letter. My name. My college address. A postmark from my junior year. I read one, he continued. From your professor. He was offering you a full scholarship to Boston. He said he never heard back. Bryn told him you declined. She sent the rejection in your name. My pulse roared in my ears. That scholarship changed her career, I whispered. I know, he said. I'm sorry. I didn't know what she did until it was already too late. I stared down at the envelope. They didn't just steal from me, I said slowly. They stole the version of me that could have existed. Jace reached across the table, then stopped, hand hovering. I'm not here to make things right. I just couldn't hold it anymore. You deserve to know the truth. The truth wasn't clean or cathartic. It was a razor. Sharp. Slow. And every word cut deeper than the last. Outside, the winter sun had finally broken through, harsh and white. I stepped out into the cold and let the air burn my lungs clean. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I need to talk to you. It's Eulalie. I met her that afternoon at a small park near the old neighborhood. Eulalie, our housekeeper, the silent fixture of my childhood. She looked smaller somehow, shoulders hunched, hands trembling around a cup of tea. I shouldn't be doing this, she said immediately, voice cracking. But I can't carry it anymore. What is it? I asked. She looked around. Then leaned in. Your mother forged your name. On the financial documents. Your dad's retirement funds. The aid forms. She rerouted them. She said it was for the sake of balance. That Bryn had more potential. She made it look like you agreed. The ground under me shifted. I signed as a witness, she added, barely a whisper. And the dog, the time Bryn locked him in the shed? I saw it. I saw her do it. But I said nothing. Your father blamed you. You remember how he screamed that night? I remembered. The guilt. The fear. The smell of mold and silence and betrayal. I'm sorry, she said. I should have stopped it. I nodded once. Thank you for telling me. She reached for my hand. I let her get close, then pulled back. Not out of cruelty. But some wounds didn't get soothed in a single afternoon. When I got home, the sky had darkened. The house loomed like a mausoleum of memories. I sat in the driveway for minutes before stepping inside. Laughter echoed faintly from the dining room. I paused just outside the threshold. Vera's voice rang out. To my beautiful daughter, who continues to make us proud. I stepped in. Funny thing about lies, I said clearly, every syllable razor sharp. When you feed them long enough, they forget they weren't born truth. The room fell silent. Bryn stiffened. Vera's hand trembled as she set her glass down. I walked to the table. Saturday, go on. Don't let me interrupt. No one moved. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. I was a threat. Later, in my room, I opened my desk drawer. The stale bread from Christmas still sat there. Mold-free, sealed like a museum artifact. My monument of cruelty disguised as tradition. My phone buzzed. Vera, if you keep digging, you'll lose more than just your place at this table. I stared at the message. Then I looked at the bread. And I replied. Try me. I stepped into the foyer just after noon, the overcast sky casting a dull glow through the sidelights, bathing the entryway in tired shades of gray. The scent of pine needles still lingered faintly in the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of baked potatoes and spiced cider, ghosts of a holiday long gone. It was the smell of forced traditions, of joy that had curdled beneath the surface. Vera stood near the front hall mirror, smoothing the fingers of her dark leather gloves. To her left was Bryn, fussing with the folds of a silk scarf as if her reflection mattered more than anything else in the world. I caught the sudden stillness in the room as I entered, the pause in idle chatter, the tightening of jaws, the brief flicker of narrowed eyes. They had noticed me. Good. That was the point. This holiday brunch redux was supposed to be an olive branch, a regathering of family under the illusion of goodwill. But I'd lived too long under their roof of pretend peace to believe it now. This wasn't an invitation, it was bait. A performance, dressed in warm tones and cinnamon rolls. I wasn't walking into reconciliation. I was walking into a stage where they expected me to smile, nod, forgive, and disappear again. But I came prepared. I held a plain box in both hands, unwrapped save for the neat folds of brown paper around it. No bow, no glitter. I didn't want theatrics. That was their language, not mine. I walked past the cluster of cousins gathered near the coffee table, past the fireplace where two uncles murmured about property taxes and golf scores. I reached the dining table and placed the box right in the center, beside a tray of cranberry scones and golden flatware no one would use. Then I stepped back and let the moment thicken. Conversation fizzled. Forks hovered midair. Vera turned, a curious smile twitching. Bryn crossed her arms. I hope you'll forgive the theatrics, I said calmly. My voice didn't waver. I made sure of that. But I brought something we forgot to unwrap. I peeled back the lid slowly, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. Inside was the slice of sourdough bread. The very one from Christmas morning. Cracked edges, hard as a rock now, its crumb pale and dry. A monument to everything they had chosen not to see. This, I said, lifting it with 2 fingers, was my Christmas gift. I let the words hang there, just long enough for the shame to start spreading. Someone coughed. A fork dropped. You gave her, I tilted my head toward Bryn, a luxury car. Leather seats, 0 mileage, dealership ribbons still intact. Then I held up the bread. And you gave me this. I laid it down gently on the table like evidence. Then I reached into my tote bag and drew out a folder, thin, but sharp-edged in its contents. Printed emails. Bank statements. Timelines. I slid it across the polished surface. I used to think this was just a difference in affection. That I wasn't lovable enough. Turns out, it was business. Alton shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Odessa, this isn't necessary. Necessary? I turned on him. You folded every time Vera cried. Every time Bryn pouted. You folded and I disappeared a little more. I opened the folder. Look. This is not revenge. This is clarity. I held up a page. See here? Odessa, closed, $500 support. That was all you thought I deserved during my final semester of college. While Bryn was in Paris. Upgraded flights. Spa treatments. All routed through your accounts. Bryn opened her mouth to object, but I raised a hand. Don't. You used to say I was too dramatic. That I misread everything. Well, here's your proof. No more guessing. Then I turned to Vera. You said I was sensitive. That I misunderstood your silence. Her lips trembled. We did what we thought was best. You always struggled with fitting in. Fitting in? I laughed once, sharp. You made sure I never did. You gave me crumbs, told me to be grateful. You called it protection. It was erasure. Behind me, someone whispered. A cousin I barely remembered. She never came to the summer reunions, did she? Another voice, I thought she just wasn't close with the family. The room shifted. I felt it, an unease rippling from person to person. Not guilt. But awareness. They were finally seeing me, not as a footnote, not as the extra chair, but as a person with a ledger and a voice. Bryn's voice cracked. This isn't fair. This is a private family matter. I looked straight at her. Then you shouldn't have made your version of the story public for years. Whispers. Pity. Mockery. She flinched. I closed the lid of the box and pushed it gently toward Vera. Consider this my RSVP to your fantasy brunch. I won't be attending your rewrites anymore. I stood. The floorboard creaked beneath my heel, but I didn't falter. I walked past them, past the frozen smiles and lowered eyes, past the hands that had never reached out when it mattered. My fingers were shaking by the time I reached the door, but I kept my chin up. The cold air slapped my cheeks as I stepped outside. Rain threatened overhead. The clouds had thickened while I'd been inside unraveling decades of lies. I slid into my car and shut the door with a firm thud. For a second, I just sat there, the throb of my heartbeat in my ears. Then my phone buzzed on the dashboard. I picked it up. New email, subject, all set. From Meredith L., attorney at law. Message, everything's prepared. Just say the word. I stared at the screen. Then I opened the draft message I had typed earlier, ready and waiting. To Vera, Alton, Bryn. Subject, a formal notice. I didn't hesitate. Send. I glanced up at the house. Lights glowed behind the lace curtains. A few silhouettes lingered by the window, watching. But they wouldn't see me crack again. Rain began tapping against the windshield in cold, delicate rhythms. I let a single breath tremble from my lips. Then I shifted into drive and pulled away. No turning back. I took one last look at the house and hit send. The storm had begun. The next morning, as dew clung to the grass and the smell of rain still lingered in the air, a courier truck pulled into my parents' driveway. I sat in my car half a block away, engine humming, windows fogging gently. The driver stepped out with a thick cream envelope, the kind that makes people nervous just by holding it. From the frosted glass of the front door, I saw Vera appear. She hesitated before opening it, her posture stiff. She signed for the envelope, closed the door, and disappeared inside. I didn't need to be close to feel the ripple of shock when she opened it. Inside that envelope was everything: statements, records, screenshots, printed emails, even photographs, evidence they never thought I'd collect. There was a document titled Family Allocations, showing years of financial favoritism toward Bryn. And there were photos of bruises, mine, time-stamped and quietly damning. Not revenge. Just the truth, finally filed. The contents had already been copied, sent to the family group chat, to legal counsel, to relatives known more for their love of scandal than loyalty. My voice was silent, but it was no longer unheard. By mid-morning, Vera's world had cracked. I imagined her phone lit up with buzzing alerts, shocked messages, quiet inquiries, judgment wrapped in politeness. By noon, she scrambled. She posted an old family photo, one of those fake smile snapshots from last summer. The caption read, "Not everything you hear is true. Some of us choose love over drama. But the internet is not kind to spin." Comments rolled in. Is this about Odessa's email? What's really going on? Love over drama? That sounds guilty. Then Bryn slithered into the thread. She's unstable, she wrote. Odessa's always needed attention. Please respect our privacy. That's the thing about digital fire, it spreads before you can smother it. People began unfollowing them, removing tags, whispering at work. I didn't post a thing. Instead, I sent a quiet email to my cousin Heather, who worked in HR at Vera's office. I attached a short video, one from years ago, showing Vera at our kitchen table, nudging a document toward me. Just sign it, sweetie. It's for your taxes. Trust me. Heather replied within minutes. This could get her fired. Want me to forward it? I typed back, not yet. Just save it. By evening, my inbox was a war zone. And then, it came, Alton's message. My father. Odessa, I stayed quiet too long. I'm sorry. I stared at it, numb. Then replied. Silence is complicity, Dad. Your words still have power, if they come with action. He didn't respond. Meanwhile, the family thread imploded. Aunts clung to tradition, cousins passed screenshots like war plans, and long-lost relatives suddenly reached out. Not to check on me, but to be sure they weren't next. Bryn, ever the master manipulator, made her move. She posted old texts I'd written, raw, emotional, broken. Her caption, see? She's always been dramatic. She thought it'd destroy me. But I'd prepared. I sent full screenshots to the same people, showing Bryn's replies, controlling, cold, manipulative. One message from 2018 stood out. If you tell anyone, Mom will never forgive you. You'll ruin everything. The tone shifted. One cousin texted, this is getting dark. Another replied, honestly? She's just telling the truth. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by documents, my laptop open to a folder titled The Mic Drop. Dozens of small clips, me setting the table alone while others laughed, Vera walking past me like I didn't exist, Bryn rolling her eyes as she called me, sweetheart, with venom. I edited them together, layered with my voice, calm, steady. This was my home. These were my people. And this is what they did to me. The screen faded to black. Then one final line appeared. Some scars don't show. But they never fade. I sent the video privately to the same list who got the envelope. No caption. No explanation. Just the truth, at last. Within minutes, my phone buzzed. Messages came in, some from people who used to ignore me. Some just wrote, "I see you now." Others said nothing, but their silence felt different now. Heavier. Across town, I knew Vera was unraveling. Bryn, panicked, probably rewriting captions, deleting comments, calling people she hadn't spoken to in years. But I didn't feel triumphant. Strangely, I felt still. There was no sweetness in justice, just the absence of bitterness. Then, just before midnight, a notification blinked on my screen. A message. From Bryn. "If you think this is over, you never really knew who I am." I stared at it. Outside, the rain tapped gently against the glass. My reflection in the dark window looked different, quieter, stronger, unfamiliar. I typed back. "Neither did you." I placed my phone down, turned off the lamp, and exhaled. The war wasn't over. But for the first time I wasn't afraid of it. Morning light broke through my curtains like a quiet decision. I sat at my small kitchen table, staring at the cream-colored envelope lying in front of me. It wasn't heavy, but it carried the weight of a decade's worth of silence. I had written every word by hand the night before, no edits, no rewrites. Just truth, unvarnished and final. I dressed simply. A gray sweater, dark jeans, the same coat I'd worn to every family gathering I'd ever been half ignored at. My hands didn't shake as I picked up the envelope and tucked it into my bag. The drive back to my parents' house felt like crossing a border I no longer recognized. The trees along the road were bare, skeletal fingers against a washed-out sky. When I turned onto their street, cars lined both sides, another brunch gathering. Another performance. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment, letting the engine hum beneath my palms. Then I shut it off, opened the door, and stepped into the cold. The front door was unlocked. It always was for family. I walked in without knocking. Conversations faltered. Silverware paused mid-air. Vera looked up from the table first, her expression freezing somewhere between surprise and calculation. "Odessa," she said, the name stiff on her tongue. "You should have told us you were coming." I didn't respond. I crossed the room slowly, my boots clicking against the hardwood, and stopped in front of the fireplace. The mantel was cluttered with framed photos, Bryn in her graduation gown, Vera and Alton smiling in front of their summer house, even one of me as a child, crooked smile, hand clutching the hem of my mother's dress. I placed the envelope on the mantel, right in the center, then turned around. "This will be my last Christmas with this family," I said. My voice was calm, but the stillness in the room made every syllable land like a stone. "You won't need to reserve a seat for me anymore." Eyes flicked between me and the envelope. Bryn blinked, her fork hovering midair. Alton's shoulders stiffened, as if he'd been caught breathing in the wrong rhythm. I took a step closer. "You built a world where I was only useful if I was silent. That world no longer exists." Vera pushed back her chair and stood, trying to regain authority. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Family fights, Odessa. That's what families do." I met her eyes. "You're confusing cruelty for culture." Her lips parted in protest, but I wasn't done. "For years, you told me kindness was weakness, that endurance was dignity. But all you did was teach me how to disappear without anyone noticing. You used love as a leash." Vera's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the envelope. I stepped between her and the mantel. "Read it when I'm gone," I said. "Let the silence sting for once." She froze. I turned, walked toward the front door. The sound of my footsteps felt louder than any argument that had ever filled that house. Behind me, Alton whispered my name. Bryn rose from her chair, voice trembling. "You're still my sister." I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, and looked back just enough for her to see my eyes. "Then you should have acted like one." I opened the door and stepped outside. The air bit at my face, sharp and clean. I didn't look back when I heard Vera's voice call after me, muffled, uncertain, half-pleading. For the first time in my life, her words didn't have gravity. The driveway felt longer than before, but lighter too. I reached my car, opened the door, and slid in. For a brief moment, I let my forehead rest against the steering wheel. There were no tears. Just air, cold, steady air, filling my lungs like freedom. I drove away. Hours later, after the brunch had dwindled and the house had quieted, Vera sat by the mantel, staring at the envelope as if it might vanish if she blinked too long. Finally, she tore it open. Inside was a single folded sheet. My handwriting covered the page, neat and deliberate. "I forgive you. But I won't forget. This is me choosing peace, by walking away from your war." Beneath it lay another document, a notarized form, stamped and signed. Notice of legal removal from family trust and estate. For a moment, no one spoke. The room seemed to deflate around them. Alton picked up the paper, his eyes glistening as he whispered, "She really meant it." Vera didn't answer. She folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and stared into the empty fireplace. The faint reflection of her face in the glass looked older, lonelier. That evening, the world began to shift again. Screenshots started circulating online, emails, bank transactions, contracts with Vera's name attached. The story found its way to her workplace. HR opened an internal review. By nightfall, Bryn's carefully curated influencer deals were paused pending investigation. Comments on her posts multiplied, "Maybe she should apologize. You can't fake that kind of pain. Odessa was right all along. I didn't post anything. I didn't need to." The silence worked for me now. 3 days later, I sat alone at a cafe downtown, a soft hum of conversation around me. The snow had started again, thin flakes drifting past the window. I stirred my coffee, watching the steam rise, feeling both weightless and untethered. On the table in front of me lay my grandmother's locket, the one thing I'd managed to keep all these years. Inside, her small handwritten note still read, "Be kind, but never small." For a long time, I just held it between my palms, remembering the way her voice could fill a room without raising above a whisper. My phone buzzed beside the cup. I glanced down. A new email. Sender, Probate Office of Cook County. Subject line, letter from the estate of Ruth Albright. My grandmother. I opened it carefully. Attached was a scanned image of an envelope bearing her name, addressed to me. The message from the clerk read, "Per your grandmother's final instructions, this letter was to be delivered exactly 1 year after her passing." I didn't open it. Not yet. I pressed it against my chest, letting the paper warm in my hand. Maybe not all goodbyes are forever. I held the envelope tight against my chest as I stepped out of the cafe, the bell above the door tinkling behind me like the last note of an old song. Outside, snow fell in soft spirals, blanketing the streets like memory settling over the world. Each flake caught the glow of the street lamps, drifting like time slowed to a whisper. In my hands, the envelope radiated a strange warmth. It wasn't from the paper itself, it was from the words it held. Words I had waited my entire life to hear. Inside was a single letter, folded neatly. The handwriting on the outside was unmistakably hers, graceful, looping, like she had always written with music in her fingertips, to Odessa, with love. The date, 6 months before she passed. My throat tightened. I hadn't even known she'd been sick. That was the first silence they kept from me. With trembling fingers, I unfolded the paper and began to read. "I always saw what they did to you. I didn't stop it, and for that I carry my own shame. But I want you to know, I never agreed with it. Not once. I've left you something, not because you asked for anything, but because you never did. You deserved so much more." I had to pause there. My vision blurred, tears rising uninvited. The air outside bit into my skin, but all I could feel was the heat of her words seeping into every part of me that had long gone numb. My eyes dropped to the bottom of the page. Enclosed were 2 things. First, a brass key, small, aged, tagged with a thin string, locker 492. The second was heavier in weight and meaning, a deed to a piece of land in Vermont. My name printed clearly on the document, legal and real. The description was almost poetic, tucked beside a quiet forest. Overlooking Stillwater Lake. Protected acreage, yours, and yours alone. At the bottom, scribbled in the margin in her hand, build the peace they never gave you. I had no words. Only breathless grief and something else, something that felt like the very beginning of freedom. I left the cafe without looking back, climbed into the rental car I had picked up that morning. My suitcase sat in the back, but for the first time, I felt like I wasn't running away. I was driving towards something. I set the GPS and watched the blue line wind its way north. The engine hummed low as I merged onto the highway. The world outside blurred into shades of gray and white, winter gripping the trees in skeletal poses. But inside me? Inside, something felt like spring. The miles stretched like ribbon through barren woods. I stopped occasionally on quiet back roads, stepped out just to feel the silence. No horns, no voices, no expectations. Just stillness. The kind that fills you up instead of draining you. For so long, I had mistaken endurance for belonging. Now, I understood, I was never meant to survive their version of love. I was meant to outgrow it. When I arrived in Vermont, dusk had begun to settle, painting the snow lavender and gold. The land was exactly as the deed had described. A clearing, a frozen lake in the distance, a rough foundation already set, like someone, perhaps Grandma herself, had started building long ago. Pine trees towered around the perimeter, like silent sentinels. The wind whispered through the needles, not harsh but familiar. Welcoming. I stood at the edge of the foundation, boots crunching against the snow, and for a long time, I didn't move. I just looked. At the blank canvas. At the untouched stillness. At the place that was now mine. For once, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for existing. I felt anchored. The key led me to a storage unit in the nearby town. Inside were boxes marked in faded ink, Odessa's, her things, keep. I opened one. My childhood drawings. Crumpled, but kept. Another, journals I thought had been tossed out. Old report cards. Letters, dozens of them, that I had written over the years and never gotten replies to. I had thought they'd been ignored. They weren't. They were hidden. Saved. One box had photographs, me and Grandma on summer porches, me holding her hand at the farmer's market, my smile missing a front tooth. Notes she'd left me tucked into birthday cards, you shine, even when they try to dim you. And taped to the inside lid of the box, the words that undid me, these are yours. They always were. I cried, but not for what was lost. I cried for what had been quietly kept. For what had survived. That night, back on the land, I cleared snow from the foundation and placed a foldable chair in the middle. I opened the deed again, touched the corner of the letter. I whispered into the trees, this is my home now. And far away, in another world, they felt it. Vera had been placed on administrative leave. An HR complaint, multiple witnesses, years of her spotless reputation now under fire. I didn't rejoice, but I didn't mourn either. Justice doesn't always wear sirens. Sometimes it shows up as silence breaking. Bryn, desperate to control the narrative, posted a tearful apology online. The internet didn't buy it. Too clean, someone wrote. You can't fake that kind of hurt. Another, Odessa was right all along. Public opinion was a mirror she couldn't dodge. Alton mailed me a check, what he claimed was the remainder of his share in the trust. I placed it in a plain envelope, sealed it, and returned it. Uncashed. Some debts aren't monetary. Some things, you simply don't get to buy back. I built a fire in the stone hearth that night. The first flame trembled, then steadied, casting golden light against the snow-draped forest. I framed Grandma's letter and placed it above the fireplace. I sat on the porch with my journal open. The wind pressed against the windows like an old question, but for once, I had an answer. I wrote. At Christmas, they gave her a car. And they gave me a crumb. But from this crumb, I baked a life they'll never taste. Above me, the snow drifted like feathers. My breath came in visible puffs. The locket from Grandma sat in my palm, solid, warm against my skin. Not a burden. A beacon. And somewhere, in a house full of walls and whispers, they felt the shift. I closed my eyes and smiled. I had left their version of the story behind. Now, I was finally writing my own. Some families teach us how to love. Others, how to survive. Mine? It taught me the cost of silence, and the price of reclaiming your voice. No matter how small you've been made to feel, you have the right to build a life that honors your worth. Have you ever had to walk away from your own blood to find peace? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this resonated with you,